Well, g'day and welcome to lesson 1 of A Course in Miracles in our attempt to do a video sequence of the first 50 lessons. And if you're on my wall, on my Facebook wall, probably where you're watching this now, you'll see the introduction there. And you'll find some other interesting stuff as well, no doubt, if you're a student of A Course in Miracles. If you're not a student of A Course in Miracles and you're completely done with the world, done with the experience that you're having in your human journey, let's say, if you want to call it that, I don't really know how else to call it, then you might want to look at the idea of retraining your mind along the lines that the Course sets forth, and it'll take about a year to do that. So I'm going to start with lesson 1. Nothing I see means anything, but before I do that, I just don't know if you can see this. We've got this very uncompromising statement on the back of the white version of A Course in Miracles, which is something that has stayed with me personally for the last 20 odd years as a point of taking responsibility for whatever it is that shows up for me, that seems to push my buttons. And believe it or not, or accept it or not, it doesn't really matter. When you begin to undergo the transformation of your mind using these workbook lessons, and I'm using today the white version of A Course in Miracles, which is the brand new version out. You could just as easily use the old blue book by the Foundation for Inner Peace, or the old green book, some people tell me they still have, or the Edgar Casey version, or the sparkly version. This is a bit of a beat up old one, the spine's missing. But it doesn't matter which one you use, the workbook's all the same. So if you wanted to read along, grab your book or whatever, and we'll get cracking. I'm doing the first 50 lessons only because people often mention to me, oh, I started the course and I got to lesson 26 or 36 or whatever, and then I had to put it down. I couldn't keep going for one reason or other. Life gets in the way. And, you know, in considering that, with the idea that life gets in the way, right, it might be easy enough to take on board then the idea that I'm manifesting excuses to keep myself in my ideas of lack and poverty and need and all of those sorts of things that we grind our teeth over in day-to-day life, because our minds are habituated to that. And if you can take on board that idea, that very simple idea that I'm responsible for what I see, blah, 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 and what I'm experiencing is a result of my thoughts, right, projecting out there into the world, and I'm getting the results of that back, right, which is what you put out, you get back. A very simple and old do unto others as you would have them do to you, etc. The necessity or the idea then that let me change my mind about my thinking about myself in the world, in relation to the world and others, etc., is something that will gather momentum as you go along and show you that that statement is true, you know, and across the board, and, you know. But trying to explain the nature of that in a little video like this is pretty well impossible. You have to get in and study and have your own experiences to see that, oh my God, I was just thinking about that and then it showed up, or I had this fear and there it is, and boom shanka, you know. So, and I've proven that to myself many, many times. It's beyond the point of even needing proof anymore. But if you're new to this, then I understand that that's going to probably be something that's threatening or confronting or whatever, as it was to me many years ago. But literally, by taking responsibility for our thinking, which is what the workbook trains us to do, we begin to then find a way out of that value system that we've given our thinking, and begin to place the meaning that we've given everything outside of ourselves, or replace that with a meaning that is given to us in our creation from within, as an identity shift, let's say, or through an identity shift, from the mistaken belief that we are bodies or people or these fleshy things, to the remembrance and the recollection and the experience of the fact that we're actually spirit and this is just our vessel. You know, and we all know that. We just tend to forget 24/7. If you're like me, I forget 24/7. And these lessons are a way to help remember that. You know. So anyway, lesson 1, let's get on to it. Lesson 1, nothing I see means anything. All right. So nothing I see in this room, on this street, from this window, in this place means anything. And if you have a reaction to these lessons as we go along, don't throw the book away or try not to. I did when I first started. It's like, no, that's rubbish. But it kept nagging away at me and I've got to buy another book. I threw that one away. But if you have a reaction to these things, just for a moment, try to push through it. Right? Try to let that happen. If you feel anxious or if you feel upset or whatever comes along as you're doing these lessons, let that happen. Even if you feel like crying or screaming or vomiting or coughing, anything can happen. And I've seen in 20 years in dealing with groups of people in, let's say, course groups or meditational groups and different sort of forums of spiritual thing, once you get involved in it, you'll realise that the reactions that people have, especially initially, to their spiritual path are life-changing, you know, physically, mentally, everything. Like, just eventually it just becomes, oh yeah, well, that's the way it is. But, you know, initially, the idea that our thought system is so far from centre, you know, like doing this, woo, way out one side and out the other, and to bring it back to a place of perfect peace, to bring our minds, our wandering chatterbox minds back to here, becomes something that's quite a confronting process. But rather than hide from it or recoil from it or whatever, I would encourage you, just based on my own experiences and from what I know of my involvement in this over the years, to just for a moment try to stick it out and undergo the transitional moment as it comes up, that moment of angst. Right? Let it happen. Breathe through it. Try not to adjust. If you adjust, so be it. It'll come back around, whatever. But try not to adjust. And no matter what your reactions are to these lessons, as we read in the introduction yesterday, just use them. It's their use that will show you that they're true. Right? So nothing I see means anything. On this street, from this window, in this place. Now look slowly around you and practice applying this idea very specifically to whatever you see. This table does not mean anything. This chair does not mean anything. This hand does not mean anything. My foot does not mean anything. This foot does not mean anything. This pen does not mean anything. Then look farther away from your immediate area and apply the idea to a wider range. That door does not mean anything. That body does not mean anything. That lamp does not mean anything. That sign does not mean anything. That shadow does not mean anything. Notice that these statements are not arranged in any order and make no allowance for differences in the kinds of things to which they are applied. That is the purpose of the exercise. The statement is merely applied to anything you see. And remember, this is just the very first lesson, right? Lesson 1. There's 365 in this whole workbook. As you practice applying the idea for the day, use it totally indiscriminately. Do not attempt to apply it to everything you see, for these exercises should not become ritualistic. All right, these exercises should not become ritualistic. Only be sure that nothing you see is specifically excluded. One thing is like another as far as the application of the idea is concerned. Each of the first 3 lessons should not be done more than twice a day. All right, this one, the next one, and the next one. Each of the first 3 lessons should not be done more than twice a day, preferably morning and evening, nor should they be attempted for more than a minute or so, unless that entails a sense of hurry. A comfortable sense of leisure is essential. Okay, and the thing that happens throughout this is that people are always saying to me, oh, I've got so much on, I don't have time to do my workbook. I had someone this morning who was saying, I wish I had time to do the lessons, blah, blah, blah. Right? in the text, if you're reading the text, and I usually encourage people to read 4 or 5 chapters at least of the text before you start the workbook, so you get a bit of a sense of the purpose that the workbook has, right? It's a combined thing, workbook and text, workbook and text. But in the text it says, this is, you know, there's the author, Jesus. It's a channeled work. You're going to find that hard to believe until you meet him. In the text it says, ask me, right? Me in capital M. Ask me for help to arrange your day. And one of the things in the course is starting your day correctly, right? You give your day to God or to Source, higher mind, whatever you want to call that. I don't really care. A lot of people have a reaction to the word God because it's been so badly abused over the decades and centuries. It's not surprising, but Source, you know, higher mind. Give your day to your higher self, right? From the heart, not just lip service. It's like you got to feel it. Today I really want a day of peace, and I want a day wherein whatever shows up that pushes my buttons, I can use that situation in the remembering that I have a new purpose to effect a change in the relationship that shows up as that button pushing thing to try and bring me peace and restore my mind to peace and offer peace, you know, to whatever it seems. So offering then your day to God, to higher mind, is important. I don't know if there's a better word than important, but it's paramount. Is that a good word? It's paramount. It's one of those things, like if you get out of bed and you're like, oh God, I've got to go to work. You've already started the day with a grumble, right? It's like, jump out of bed and it's like, yes, today's the day that I'm going to be vigilant for my own inner peace so that I can put this into practice, you know. And as you go on with the workbook lessons, they take a slightly different turn this way, that way, and start to deal with different parts of the mind, you know, different areas of the mind. At first you're looking with your eyes open, then you're going closed and you're dealing with your thoughts specifically, and, you know, it's an incredible journey, right? But one of the other things that I want to mention is this, that I always have people that try to use this as an accompaniment to daily life to give themselves a better life in the world, to become more successful at business, more romantic in their love life, you know, all that sort of thing, because the spiritual world and the new age idea of what spiritual is a vast and great corruption, right? I remember there was once a book called The 7 Steps to Spiritual Health, Wealth and Happiness or something like that. And it's like, that's not what it's for. This is to liberate you from the necessity to be concerned about those things in your entirety, in its entirety, right? So that whatever comes to you each day, there is a recognition that if $10 comes to me today, that's perfect. It'll be all that I need. If it doesn't, that's perfect. I won't need it. All of that sort of thing. So when Jesus says, you know, like in the biblical sense, give up the world and follow me, and then the merchant, well, let me, you know, I'll just go and sell my stuff and then I'll follow you. It's like, no, give up the world and follow me. The kingdom of heaven waits for no man. It's like your own inner peace has to be the thing that you value more than whatever seems to be going on for you outside yourself. If you're still thinking that there's something in the world you need to pursue, need to accomplish, need to get on with, right? If you haven't reached that bottom rung, if you're not suicidal, if you're not having these completely devastating thoughts, if you're not crying out for help in your heart, then I'm not saying don't do this course, but I'm saying look at the reasons, you know, look seriously at your life, because, and it was the same for me. I still had things out in the world I wanted to do, but where I was at that point in my life when this came along, I was suicidal. You know, I'd already tried once, put myself in hospital, and the second time, 10 years later, it came around again. I knew I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet for much longer. And I prayed. 3 days later, boom, shanker, that arrived in my awareness, and I began the training. And because I'd already realized in that dark night of my soul that I didn't want anything in the world, I was done with it, even though I was probably lying a little bit there. There probably was still a little, you know, there was still this residual, you know, oh, she's pretty, or oh, that's a nice stereo system and all this sort of thing. Those ideas were then still applicable to my karmic journey, if you like, but I surrendered them to this in the willingness to have only what God would give, not what I would try to make for myself. And my life's been much easier, much simpler, much more peaceful. And all of these things, I've got a stereo, I've got a wife, I've got all these things, you know, and I don't value any of it. It doesn't have a meaning to me, but it just, if I need it, it's there. If I don't, and that's the miraculous nature of the universe. You know, it's like Albert Einstein said, nature abhors a vacuum. If you have a need, it will be fulfilled. It's like God knows what you want before you ask. It's like the spiritual journey is one of faith. Step out into the unknown in the willingness to be shown what is in your own best interests and just let it happen. And for most of us, I think that's going to entail falling into a cataclysmic heap at some point. You know, I don't know anyone who's been through this who hasn't completely collapsed into a despair, a dark, you know. But that's part of it. If you don't have a lot of shit going on in your life, if this isn't bringing up the blocks to love in you, you're not doing it properly. You know, you've got to confront those blocks and miraculously have them healed through your willingness to forgive yourself for making them up in the first place. It's a funny journey. So, all right, I love you, and we'll do lesson 2 tomorrow. And hopefully, if you're new to this, you'll start to get a grip on where it's headed. But thanks to everyone who's inboxed me today. I've had like 2 people, so everyone. Thanks to everyone who's inboxed me saying they've been waiting for me to do this and everything. It is encouraging. And I did post the first one on about 30 or 40 different groups that I'm in. So I'll be interested actually to see what kind of feedback. I mean, I swear a bit and carry on a bit. But, you know, I think overall in the willingness to be helpful, it's, you know, it's absorbed. But if you think I talk too fast, or I'm not explaining things properly, or not going through, or if I read too quickly, or whatever, just let me know. I can slow it down. If you want me to reread things, let me know. You know, I'm happy to do whatever. Okay, love you, and see you tomorrow.